So thanks for joining me today. Hi, both.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Great. Maybe I could come to you, Deb, to tell us a bit about Juniata College and yourself.
Sure. So I am assistant professor of English and director of Language in Motion. I teach linguistics and several first-year experience courses. Language in Motion is a program that started at Juniata in the year 2000, and I've been directing it since then. Juniata is a small, private, four-year liberal arts college, coeducational. There are about 1,300 students now, I think, and we are located in rural central Pennsylvania in a small town nestled in the Appalachian Mountains with a lot of farms and forests around us. We have quite a strong reputation for our international programs at Juniata, about 9% international students at Juniata, even though we're not a place that people abroad have generally heard of. And we average in a given year from about 30 to 50% study abroad students, which I think is quite spectacular for our location.
Yeah, it sounds really exciting, and you've made your location sound really appealing in a range of ways. So thanks for telling us about your role. Maybe we can move over to Caitlin now. Hi, Caitlin.
So my name is Caitlin Murphy, and I have the pleasure of working with Deb at Juniata, and I work in the Center for International Education as the acting dean. My job is primarily to encourage students to study abroad, to welcome our international and exchange students to our campus, and pretty much anything that you could think of that is international programming. We have something called the Global Village, and it's a live and learn community where our students kind of cohabitate and do programs about cultural events, food, fashion shows. So my role is really to look at programming events all throughout campus that touches both our outgoing and incoming students.
Brilliant, thank you. And so we're here today to talk about internationalisation at home. And it'd be great if you could tell us a bit more about why you think it's something that's important and why you're active in that space. So maybe over to you, Caitlin.
Yeah, so especially right now during a pandemic that doesn't seem to be lessening up anytime in the immediate future, but there's hope at the end of the tunnel. But if we can't be sending as many students abroad or receiving as many students abroad, we need to find more creative ways to make our students aware of the world and get access to the world. And I know Deb can kind of jump in at any point and give some more clarifying points as we go on, but we need to find curricular ways, but also co-curricular ways. And often those two things are often married to one another to get the full effect. So we find it extremely valuable in our location, kind of being isolated in general. And then when you put a pandemic around those sorts of constraints, it's even more important to make it even more visible and accessible to our students.
Thank you. So you've told us a bit about why you think internationalisation at home is important. Can you place it for us in your institutional approach at Juniata?
Sure. So internationalization has really been a key in our strategic plan. It's kind of been a foundational pillar for Juniata. So our faculty took a very deep interest in it many, many years ago. So we find that in almost any department, it's not just housed maybe in languages or humanities, but in the sciences and mathematics. I mean, we have these built exchanges, we have faculty exchanges. We find our faculty want to be traveling and sort of learning about the world so they can bring it back and create those curricular opportunities or create those kind of connections for our students. We have, as I mentioned before, some of our co-curricular programming in the Global Village, so trying to build in residential experiences for students to learn about the world. We have international cultural clubs on campus, and they focus on so many different parts of the world. And so our students tend to create their focus groups, and they put on something called the Multicultural Story Fest, and they showcase different, dress and language and performances. And then we also have cultural dinners. And this semester, it's been really exciting to see how they're connecting with their international students virtually. So for students who might not have been able to travel due to other constraints. And then, of course, our signature program, Language in Motion, which, as you know, and Deb, I would love to invite Deb into this to talk about, as she's been part of it, 20 plus years of it going on, being very successful and being a nationally recognized program.
Excellent. So that's a great segue into your activities, Deb, why they're successful and how you think perhaps students have benefited over the years.
Well, those are excellent questions. Language in Motion started in 2000. I got involved in the writing of the grant proposal that funded the pilot. We began with a concept, and then we went pretty directly to our community partners. The real success of a program like Language in Motion comes from an ongoing collaboration with partners. One of the teachers that was an early partner with us said, I would like for the world to come to my students if I can't take all of them to the world. Language in Motion does that. I think that was real motivation for us in terms of looking at the needs in our community, the understanding that many students come into higher education without a curiosity for the world. And so we thought if we could get students eager and interested before they came to the higher education level, that we would get a greater participation in our international programs, our courses. So we set up Language in Motion to get people more excited about the world and its peoples, to improve and enrich the language and culture teaching across all levels of education, and to try to build connections with teachers at these different levels who felt quite estranged from faculty in the higher educational institutions, where really we're all working for the same goals and the same objectives. And we wanted to collaborate with them, create a network of educators locally, and then expanded and created a national consortium of Language in Motion institutions.
That last part you said as if that was an easy undertaking, the network dimension, that was just an add-on. I'm sure that was a big piece of work.
It was a big piece of work, and it doesn't always work every time, and you have to be patient and understanding that different institutions and different communities are at different places and have different needs and different funds available. So yeah, I think became pretty clear that Language in Motion was quite a flexible model. And if we could cultivate the various components of it in a way that could adapt in different contexts, that it would be more successful. Because when I look around, it's not just rural parts of the United States who need this kind of connection to the world, but it's pretty much everywhere.
And it's also a way of connecting the local community to internationalisation in a very positive way. Certainly in the UK at the moment, that is something we need to try to do more and more. Thank you.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that our administration at the college was concerned about, was like, well, that's great. I can see why it's beneficial for the community, but why is it good for us and our students? Because that's our job. And so we had to talk about that, and there really are a lot of ways that our students benefit from this. But I think one of the things that makes us distinctive is not that we have international students who participate and go out into community and share their knowledge of their home countries and cultures and languages, but rather also students who have different sorts of backgrounds, so that come back from study abroad and can share those experiences. So I think that's one of the things that makes us distinctive.
Absolutely. So in terms of challenges, what other challenges have you faced in bringing this approach to success?
Well, certainly funding is always the biggest question, the biggest challenge, pretty much everywhere across our consortium, and including those who signed on and then had to withdraw. And some of them have stayed in the consortium, but just don't have active programs because they don't have the funding. Sometimes it's administrative support, as I described, right? The administrators who are sort of more domestically focused and don't understand the value of things international. So that can be a challenge. In our area, one of the challenges is transportation, because when we're not in COVID, we go into schools in person. And because we're in a rural area, there's no public transit, which is pretty bad, but there isn't. And so that means that we have to provide transportation for students to get to and from the schools, which is a scheduling challenge as well as a transportation challenge. In more recent years, as people have become more worried about security in school buildings, trying to figure out how to negotiate the expectations for ensuring the safety of the students has been something we've had to deal with. I'm fortunate to have a fantastic student staff who helps with a lot of the logistics and the evaluation process and all of that. But then, of course, inherent in that is that students only stick around for 4 years. And so you have to have a turnover constantly in your staff, which is both exciting and also challenging.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing those with us. So I wanted to ask now, obviously you're a private institution in the US, but how well do you think this kind of activity is supported by the national agenda in the US for internationalization in higher education?
I can jump in there. So one of our leading organizations in international education in the US is NAFSA, the Association of International Educators. And so they've been talking, pushing internationalization for as long as I can remember in various ways. And I would argue that the pandemic has really allowed everyone sort of to feel the urgency and also the time to get on board and get the technology that we often need to make some of these other connections possible. So I know Deb will talk about this, but ways that language and motion has adapted now that we can't physically be in spaces with people, and how exciting that is and what opportunities exist. But I would say that, in the US, we're very fortunate that the agenda of internationalization at home is still huge, but I would argue that even now more so, there's tons of free webinars and a push for, professional development around this field, and finding ways to leverage consortiums like Deb mentioned, or leveraging successful case studies, trying to share that knowledge. I think the field in general is very open and supportive and collaborative in that way.
Thank you. That's great to hear that you've got that supportive resource in a range of ways. So Deb, we've talked a bit about the pandemic and the impact that has, both positive and negative. Maybe you could tell us a bit more how that's influenced your particular activities this year.
Yeah, sure. We have been working to develop a flexible model that we can share with other institutions. We have a program handbook that we share with anyone who is interested in joining our collaboration. And our collaboration is not restricted to the US, I would add. It is currently, but doesn't have to be. We'd welcome people from elsewhere. But one of the things that we've discovered through the pandemic is that it's even more flexible than I had imagined, which is great. So we pretty easily adapted to an all virtual delivery system last spring, although that was never our intention, because our early attempts at virtual connections with classes showed us that really the most effective way to do this is to go into the classrooms and be physically in the same space. But a virtual connection is far better than no connection. And so we pretty quickly switched over. We have very loyal teacher partners who were willing to work with us to figure out how to do synchronous presentations with their students, some of whom were in the schools with them at the time. Now we're in these hybrid flex versions of education where some students are at school, some are at home, some are asynchronous. So it gets very confusing very quickly. But they have worked out ways to have synchronous presentations. We've had what I'm calling programs in a box, which are basically asynchronous presentations that have all of their materials created with directions and references to everything that students can use or teachers can use with the students. We've come up with a variety of different ways to deliver the kinds of information that we have. Because of our doing so much virtually now, geography is not the boundary that it used to be. We did have occasionally alumni who sometimes return to the college and will want to go out and do another presentation with schools. But with this breaking down of geographic boundaries, then it means our host schools can be anywhere. It means that some international students have been able to present directly from their home countries, even though they weren't intending to originally. We had a student who went home last spring to China, and because his city was not particularly affected at that point by the virus, he was able to go out and make videos in places around his home city and share them with students, and that would not have been possible. So some things have really been nice opportunities. My capstone right now is that next week we have a previous language in motion presenter from Pakistan who was here at Juniata a couple of years ago. I told her that we had a teacher who wanted someone to talk about life in Pakistan, and she jumped at the chance. She said, I teach first grade now, and I remember how important it was for me to be a cultural ambassador while I was in the United States, and to be able to continue that role, even though I'm at home now, is so important to me. So I'm really excited about that taking place as well.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. It does show the longitudinal impact on people's lives and their enduring enthusiasm for that kind of activity. Thanks. And so my last question is really about your next steps and what you hope will happen for the development of your activities in internationalization at home?
Well, right now, Juniata is undergoing a pretty large reorganization. Language in Motion, fortunately, has strong administrative support. Our provost is a big supporter. And so Language in Motion, she has told me that Language in Motion will continue in spite of the reorganization that's happening. And so that's really gratifying, of course, mostly for what it will be doing for our students and our communities. I think we also want to continue our collaborations at the consortium level for sure. And it's been really nice to have professionals get together and share their successes and strategies and challenges and ways that we can think in new ways about the opportunities that are out here and the things that we need to learn to do better. So that's been really great. Continuing to cultivate current relationships with teachers and schools is an ongoing next step. And I think finally, I would say that one of the things that we need to be working on is trying to improve the attention that internationalization at home is getting, both in our local area and also further afield, because I think I a little bit worry that the US is becoming too introspective and needs to be looking outward as well as inward. And so the more that we can talk about the value of internationalization in any way that it's happening, I think will be a good thing for all of us everywhere.
Thank you very much indeed.
I could jump in to just say something that I didn't mention, but it kind of came to me as Deb was speaking. You know, we're currently working on building our connections with other institutions virtually right now in, you know, what we call COIL, or Collaborative Online International Learning. And what I was thinking is, you know, the Language in Motion model is kind of very similar to this idea, even though we can't physically enter into, you know, our exchange partners' sites often. But sharing this knowledge about language, culture, history, or maybe other disciplines, kind of it lends itself to this similar model.
Thank you. That's brilliant. I really enjoyed talking to you, and there's so many takeaways from that. Thanks for joining me today. I wish you all the best with the ongoing development of your work. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a delight, and I do welcome inquiries from anyone who might want to know more.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.